Cristen, let me speak this directly into you with power and clarity. There comes a moment in every person's life when they must decide whether they will be shaped by the weight of their circumstances or by the strength of their conviction. A moment when you look in the mirror and realize that the world hasn't been holding you back nearly as much as the voice inside your own mind. And once you understand that truth, once you recognize that you are the gatekeeper of your own destiny, everything begins to shift. Because the greatest battles you will ever fight won't be against people. They will be against doubt, fear, hesitation, and the quiet lies that try to convince you that greatness is meant for someone else. But hear me, you were not created to live small. You were not designed to shrink. You were built with purpose stitched into your bones, with strength woven into your spirit, with potential waiting to be activated the moment you decide you are done living below your calling. You have survived moments that were meant to break you, and yet here you stand. You have carried weights that others never saw, and still you rise. There is something inside you, something powerful, something resilient, something unshakable that refuses to let you quit. And it's time for you to acknowledge it. It's time to stop telling yourself the story of your limitation and start telling yourself the truth of your capability. Your life will follow the direction of your focus. If you focus on fear, fear will lead you. If you focus on excuses, excuses will surround you. But if you focus on purpose, purpose will pull you higher than you ever imagined. You must speak to yourself like someone you are responsible for lifting.
Stop tearing down your own foundation. Stop rehearsing what went wrong.
Stop reliving moments that no longer deserve a place in your narrative. Instead, talk to yourself like someone who deserves victory. Because you do. Every breakthrough you're waiting for begins inside your own mind. What you repeat becomes what you believe, and what you believe becomes what you do. Your identity is shaped by repetition. So repeat truth, repeat strength, repeat possibility. Overwhelm doubt with declarations that remind you who you are: capable, chosen, resilient, unstoppable. Yes, there will be moments when fear tries to creep back in. But fear is a liar that only survives in the absence of intentional truth. When fear whispers, you answer with purpose. When doubt questions you, you respond with certainty. When old wounds try to reopen, you cover them with new wisdom. You are not the person you once were. You are evolving. You are elevating. You are stepping into a version of yourself that your past could never have imagined. And hear this clearly, your future is calling you, and it refuses to let your past speak louder than your potential. Breakthrough does not happen when circumstances change. Breakthrough happens when the conversation inside you changes, when your inner voice finally aligns with the destiny waiting ahead of you. This is your moment. Not tomorrow, not someday. Now step into your power, step into your identity, step into your purpose, because everything you are capable of becoming is waiting on the other side of your decision to rise. Your inner dialogue is the steering wheel of your destiny, constantly guiding, directing, and influencing the path you walk, whether you realize it or not. Long before your feet move, your mind moves. Long before your actions shift, your thoughts shift. And long before your destiny unfolds, your beliefs begin to shape its outline. Most people underestimate the power of the quiet, private conversations they hold with themselves, but those conversations determine almost everything about how their lives unfold. What you repeatedly say within the walls of your own mind becomes the force that pushes you forward, or the weight that holds you down. Think of it this way: a person can have incredible talent, unlimited potential, gifts that could change the world, but if their inner dialogue is flooded with fear, doubt, or self-criticism, they will drive themselves straight into places of limitation. The mind is a powerful engine. But without the right direction, it can take you to places you never intended to go. When your internal voice says you are not capable, you start acting like someone incapable. When it says you're not worthy, you begin to behave as though you don't deserve opportunity. When it says you're already defeated, you stop fighting battles that you were actually meant to win. You may not even recognize it happening because inner dialogue doesn't scream, it whispers. But those whispers shape your reality more than the loudest opinions around you. On the other hand, when you intentionally shift your inner dialogue to speak life, strength, and truth over yourself, something extraordinary begins to take place. Your posture changes, your energy rises, your decisions grow bolder, and your willingness to step into the unknown increases. You begin to internalize a different identity, not one built from past pain or people's opinions, but one built from the belief that you are capable of more than you've ever attempted. Changing your inner dialogue is not about telling yourself lies or pretending challenges don't exist. It's about refusing to let destructive narratives run your life. It's about choosing a voice that aligns with who you are becoming, not the fears tied to who you once were. Every breakthrough starts with a conversation. Every transformation begins with a decision made in the privacy of your mind. Your thoughts carve the pathway that your actions follow. When your inner voice becomes intentional, empowered, disciplined, and aligned with growth, the rest of your life starts to respond. You walk differently because you think differently. You pursue opportunities you used to talk yourself out of. You stop settling for environments or relationships that shrink you because your thoughts no longer give them permission to define you. You recognize that the first person who must agree with your destiny is you. It is also important to acknowledge that inner dialogue does not magically change itself. It requires awareness, interruption, and replacement. Awareness means paying attention to what you say about yourself when nobody is listening. Interruption means catching negative thought patterns the moment they try to take over. Replacement means choosing a stronger, more truthful narrative and repeating it until it becomes your new internal default. This is not a one-time adjustment. It is a practice. It is mental discipline. It is building a new vocabulary for your soul. Over time, the voice that once worked against you becomes the voice that stands with you, fights for you, and uplifts you. Your life will always expand or contract to the size of the thoughts you allow to dominate your mind. If you feed yourself insecurity, your world will shrink. If you feed yourself courage, your world will grow. If you feed yourself excuses, you will stay stuck. If you feed yourself possibility, you will step toward paths you once believed were out of your reach. You are not controlled by circumstance nearly as much as you are controlled by interpretation. Two people can experience the same setback. One spirals because their inner dialogue brands it as failure, and the other rises because their inner dialogue calls it a lesson. The event is the same. The interpretation becomes the difference between stagnation and elevation. Your destiny is not determined by chance, luck, or coincidence. It is shaped daily by the direction you allow your inner voice to steer you. Every moment you choose empowering thoughts, you turn the wheel toward purpose. Every moment you refuse to speak defeat over yourself, you turn the wheel toward possibility. Every moment you shift your internal narrative from fear to faith, from insecurity to identity, from doubt to determination, you take control of the road ahead. Speak to yourself like someone you are responsible for lifting, not destroying. Most people extend compassion, patience, and understanding to others, yet speak to themselves with a level of harshness they would never direct toward a friend, a child, or even a stranger. The words you use internally matter more than the words you use externally, because the internal ones sink deeper. They shape your identity, influence your behavior, and determine the emotional climate you live in every day. When you talk to yourself as though you are unworthy, hopeless, or constantly failing, You create an atmosphere inside your own mind that suffocates growth. But when you speak to yourself like someone you are meant to lift, encourage, and protect, you build an inner world that supports your strength instead of sabotaging it. Imagine someone you deeply care about going through a difficult moment. You wouldn't look them in the eyes and say, you're not good enough, or you always mess everything up, or you don't deserve better. You wouldn't tear them apart when they're already struggling. You would offer comfort, direction, reassurance, and a reminder that their value has not diminished. Yet many people deliver those very blows to themselves without hesitation. They think the inner criticism will somehow push them to do better, but in reality, it pushes them toward insecurity, hesitation, and fear. Growth does not come from self-abuse. It comes from self-support. Motivation does not come from tearing yourself down. It comes from believing you are capable of more. Speaking to yourself like someone you are responsible for lifting means choosing language that strengthens the foundation of who you are instead of cracking it. It means recognizing that your inner voice is not just commentary, it is fuel. The right words can fuel courage, resilience, and clarity. The wrong words can fuel anxiety, doubt, and discouragement. Being responsible for yourself means treating your inner world with the same intentional care you would give to someone who looks up to you. If you are mentoring someone who is learning, growing, and trying their best, your guidance would be supportive, honest, but rooted in love. That is the kind of relationship you must build with yourself. This mindset does not mean avoiding accountability or pretending everything is perfect. Accountability delivered with compassion is far more effective than accountability delivered with cruelty. When you lift someone, you don't deny their mistakes. You help them rise above those mistakes without losing their sense of worth. Likewise, when you lift yourself, you acknowledge where you can improve, but refuse to let your flaws define your identity. You remind yourself that imperfection is part of being human and progress is always possible. You speak with the intention to elevate, not crush. When you take on the responsibility of lifting yourself, you also begin to understand the power of giving yourself permission to grow. So many people stay stuck, not because they lack ability, but because their inner voice has convinced them that they are not allowed to evolve. They replay old stories, cling to past failures, or echo the hurtful words others once used against them. But speaking to yourself with the intention to uplift breaks those patterns. You begin to replace limiting beliefs with empowering truths. You begin to tell yourself that you are worthy of healing, worthy of opportunity, and worthy of change. You begin to create internal narratives that align with your future, not your fears. There will be days when your inner voice naturally leans negative, because the mind often reacts to stress by reverting to old habits. That is why intentionality is crucial. Lifting yourself requires awareness. Catching the moment your thoughts shift towards self-destruction and choosing to redirect them. It might feel unnatural at first, especially if you are used to being your own harshest critic. But with practice, the supportive voice grows louder. It becomes easier to say, I can handle this, instead of I'll never get it right. It becomes easier to say, I'm learning, instead of I'm failing. It becomes easier to say, I deserve better, instead of this is all I get. Treating yourself with compassion creates inner strength, not weakness. It does not make you soft, it makes you resilient. When you build yourself instead of breaking yourself, you develop the courage to take risks, pursue opportunities, and stand firm in your identity. You stop waiting for others to validate you because you have learned how to validate yourself. You stop shrinking to make others comfortable because your inner foundation is strong enough to support your growth. You stop apologizing for existing because you finally recognize your worth. Speak to yourself like someone you are responsible for lifting, not destroying, because you are the longest relationship you will ever have, and the words you choose today will shape the person you become tomorrow. Replace fear-based thoughts with purpose-driven declarations. Fear loves to disguise itself as logic, caution, or realism, but beneath its surface lies a voice designed to shrink your potential. Fear speaks in limitations. It whispers worst-case scenarios, reminding you of past disappointments, convincing you that stepping forward is too risky, too uncertain, too overwhelming. Fear keeps you rehearsing failure long before it ever happens. It binds your imagination to negative expectations and stops you from pursuing possibilities that are fully within your reach. Every time you allow fear to narrate your thoughts, it steers your decisions, influences your behavior, and convinces you to abandon opportunities that were meant to elevate your life. But when you replace those fear-based thoughts with purpose-driven declarations, you shift the entire atmosphere of your inner world. Purpose speaks a different language. Purpose pushes you toward growth, not retreat. Purpose reminds you of what is possible, not what is dangerous. Purpose lifts you above self-doubt and anchors you in strength. Unlike fear, which focuses on what might go wrong, purpose focuses on what is worth fighting for. When you allow purpose to shape your inner dialogue, your mindset begins to align with who you are becoming, not the insecurities that once held you back. Fear says you can't handle this. Purpose says you were built for this. Fear says, what if you fail? Purpose says, what if this is the moment that changes everything? Fear says, you're not ready. Purpose says, every step you take prepares you. Fear says, stay comfortable. Purpose says, rise higher.
These purpose-driven declarations are not empty phrases meant to mask anxiety. They are intentional truths
Designed to root you in clarity and direction.
They remind you that you are not defined by fear, but by the strength of what you choose to believe. When you declare purpose over your life, you reclaim the authority that fear once held. You shift from reacting to life to leading your life with intention.
Replacing fear requires conscious effort because fear-based thoughts often arrive automatically. They come from old wounds, past failures, or voices from childhood that still echo in adulthood. You cannot control the first fearful thought that enters your mind, but you can control what you say back to it. That is where purpose-driven declarations become powerful. They interrupt the pattern. They challenge the narrative. They create new pathways in your thinking. When fear tells you you're not enough, you declare, I am capable, powerful, and equipped. When fear tells you your dreams are unrealistic, you declare, I am called to things bigger than my comfort zone. When fear reminds you of your mistakes, you declare, my growth matters more than my past. Purpose-driven declarations are not just motivational words. They are weapons. They fight against the mental patterns that have kept you small. They replace the instinct to retreat with the courage to advance. Over time, these declarations reshape your identity. The more you declare purpose, the more you begin to embody it. The more you affirm intention, the more your actions begin to align with it. Your brain learns to respond to life from a place of strength rather than avoidance. You become someone who moves with conviction instead of hesitation. Living with purpose does not mean you eliminate fear completely. It means fear no longer gets the final say. It means fear may knock on the door, but purpose answers. It means fear may show you all the reasons to stop, but purpose shows you the one reason to keep going.
It means acknowledging fear's presence without submitting to its influence.
When you declare purpose, you are choosing courage over comfort, growth over stagnation, and identity over insecurity. The transformation becomes noticeable. You start making decisions that align with your goals instead of your fears. You start taking opportunities you once talked yourself out of. You stop doubting your worth and start standing in it. You recognize that life opens up for those who choose intention over intimidation. Fear may still whisper, but it loses its power when your inner dialogue becomes filled with declarations that ignite your purpose rather than suffocate it. Replacing fear-based thoughts with purpose-driven declarations is an ongoing discipline. It requires awareness, repetition, and unwavering commitment. Every time you choose purpose, you strengthen mental muscles that fear once weakened. You build resilience, you build clarity, you build momentum. And with every declaration, you remind yourself that your life is meant to be led by vision, not by fear.
Your identity is shaped by repetition.
Not by one decision, not by one mistake, not by one moment of confidence or doubt, but by the thoughts, actions, and habits you repeat day after day. Human beings are creatures of pattern. The things you do consistently become the blueprint of who you are. The things you say to yourself repeatedly become the foundation of how you see yourself. The behaviors you practice again and again become the evidence your mind uses to define your capabilities, your worth, and your potential. Repetition is powerful because it engraves identity into the deepest parts of your being. Most people underestimate the force of repetition because they look at life in terms of big events, successes, failures, breakthroughs, setbacks. But identity doesn't form in big events. It forms in quiet routines. The thoughts you repeat every morning, the habits you reinforce every afternoon, the words you speak over yourself every night. If you consistently repeat thoughts of insecurity, your identity becomes rooted in insecurity. If you repeatedly tell yourself you're weak, your actions will follow that belief. If you rehearse fear, fear becomes familiar. But if you repeatedly declare courage, courage becomes natural. If you practice discipline daily, discipline becomes part of your character. If you feed your mind positive truth consistently, it will begin to override the negativity that once defined your inner world. Repetition is the mind's training ground. Whatever you expose your mind to most often becomes what it accepts as truth. It does not matter whether that truth is empowering or destructive. The mind simply absorbs what it hears frequently. That is why repeated criticism can damage a person's self-worth, and repeated encouragement can transform it. That is why repeating destructive habits reinforces shame, while repeating healthy habits builds confidence. The mind cannot distinguish between repetition meant to lift you and repetition meant to break you. It only knows what you give it over and over again. This is why becoming intentional about repetition is essential. You cannot build a strong identity on occasional effort. You cannot become confident if your positive self-talk appears only once in a while. You cannot develop discipline if you practice it only when you feel motivated. Repetition is what converts effort into identity. What starts as a decision becomes a pattern, and the pattern becomes a part of who you are. You practice resilience enough times, and eventually you stop seeing yourself as fragile. You practice speaking truth over your life long enough, and eventually negative thoughts lose their authority. You practice showing up for yourself consistently, and eventually you trust your own strength. Identity is not a one-time event. It is a daily construction project. Every repeated thought lays a brick. Every repeated behavior adds structure. Every repeated choice strengthens the foundation. Even the small repetitions matter, because identity is built in the small things long before it is revealed in the big things. The person who repeats tiny moments of progress each day becomes the person capable of big breakthroughs. The person who repeatedly chooses responsibility becomes someone who can be trusted. The person who repeatedly steps toward their purpose eventually becomes someone who walks in destiny effortlessly. You must also understand that repetition does not only shape the identity you want, it can also reinforce the identity you're trying to escape. If you repeatedly tell yourself you're not enough, that becomes a belief. If you repeatedly avoid challenges, you unconsciously create an identity that avoids growth. If you repeatedly respond to difficulty by quitting, your mind begins to define you as someone who doesn't push through. Repetition doesn't judge. It simply makes whatever you repeat easier to believe and harder to change. The power, however, is that repetition can work in your favor the moment you choose to direct it. When you begin replacing old patterns with intentional ones, your identity starts to shift. It might feel unnatural at first to declare positive truths or practice new habits, but repetition turns discomfort into normalcy. The more you repeat something aligned with your purpose, the more natural it becomes. Your identity evolves in the direction of your consistency. You have the ability to rewrite who you are through the thoughts you affirm and the actions you practice every single day. You do not need a dramatic moment to transform your identity. You need repeated effort, repeated truth, repeated courage, repeated belief. Over time, repetition reshapes your internal narrative, your emotional responses, your habits, and your definition of self. Eventually, the person you once struggled to become becomes the person you naturally are. All because repetition carved that identity into you one day, one decision, one thought at a time. Silence the voice of doubt by overwhelming it with intentional truth. Doubt is persistent, subtle, and cunning. It rarely arrives loudly. It slips quietly into the mind, questioning your worth, your dreams, your progress, your potential. Doubt does not need evidence to speak. It often appears without invitation, shaped by old insecurities, past failures, or the weight of other people's opinions. The voice of doubt tells you that you are not ready, not qualified, not strong enough, not deserving enough. It magnifies your weaknesses and minimizes your strengths. If you allow it to speak unchecked, it grows louder, more convincing, and more influential. The mind is sensitive to repetition. And when doubt keeps repeating its message, you begin to internalize it as truth, even when it is built on nothing but fear. But there's a force stronger than doubt: intentional truth. Truth spoken with purpose, conviction, and clarity has the power to dismantle even the most deeply rooted insecurities. Intentional truth is not about pretending everything is perfect. It is about reminding yourself of what is real, what is possible, and what is within you. When you deliberately speak truth over your life, you challenge the authority that doubt tries to hold.
Doubt thrives in silence.
It grows in the absence of counter-argument. But truth becomes a weapon when you wield it intentionally. It interrupts doubt and reminds your mind of who you are and what you are capable of becoming. Silencing doubt does not mean eliminating every uncertain thought. It means refusing to let those thoughts control the narrative of your life. Doubt may whisper, but you get to decide whether it becomes your belief. And the way you resist doubt is by overwhelming it with truth that is louder, stronger, and more consistent. When doubt says you have failed too many times, intentional truth says every failure prepared you for the next level. When doubt says you are not enough, intentional truth says you are equipped with everything you need to grow. When doubt says the future is too uncertain, intentional truth says uncertainty is the place where possibilities live. When doubt says you are alone, intentional truth reminds you that strength, resilience, and inner wisdom are always with you. Speaking intentional truth requires discipline. Doubt is automatic, truth is chosen. Doubt is emotional, truth is foundational. Doubt pulls you backward, truth pulls you forward. This means you cannot wait for truth to arise on its own. You have to create it, declare it, and repeat it until it becomes the dominant voice within you. The mind becomes loyal to the thoughts you feed it most frequently. So truth must be fed deliberately. You must speak it when you wake up, when you feel weak, when you feel discouraged, and even when you feel strong. Truth must become your constant internal reinforcement. Intentional truth is not just positive thinking. It is purposeful thinking. It is aligning your thoughts with reality rather than fear. It is remembering your progress, your resilience, your growth, and your purpose. It is reminding yourself that you have survived every challenge so far, that you have overcome things you once thought would break you, and that the voice of doubt has been wrong about you many times before. Truth grounds you in what is real. Doubt inflates what is imagined. Overwhelming doubt with truth also requires awareness. You must learn to catch doubt in the moment it arises. The sooner you identify it, the easier it is to confront. Doubt often begins as a small thought. Maybe I'm not good enough. Maybe it won't work. Maybe I shouldn't try. Left unchallenged, it becomes a belief. Challenged early, it loses power. This is why awareness matters. When the thought enters, you meet it immediately with truth. You replace the uncertainty with a declaration that affirms your strength, your direction, and your purpose. As you practice this consistently, doubt begins to lose its influence. It becomes quieter, less convincing, and less persistent. Truth, on the other hand, becomes stronger and more natural. Your identity shifts because your internal narrative changes. You start to see yourself from a place of confidence rather than fear. You begin to make decisions from a place of clarity rather than hesitation. You step into opportunities that doubt once convinced you to avoid. You discover that the most significant transformation happens not when doubt disappears, but when truth becomes louder. Silencing doubt with intentional truth is not a one-time moment. It is a lifelong practice. The voice of doubt may return, but the truth you plant within yourself becomes the shield that protects your mind and fortifies your spirit. The more truth you speak, the more powerful you become, because your inner world begins to align with strength rather than fear. Breakthrough begins the moment your internal conversation aligns with your future, not your past. The greatest transformations in life do not start with external changes. They begin in the hidden dialogue within your own mind. Your past is a collection of experiences, lessons, wounds, victories, and moments that shaped you. But it is not the blueprint of where you are going. Yet many people allow their inner voice to be trained by old failures, old disappointments, old fears, and old identities. They rehearse memories instead of rehearsing possibilities. They let outdated versions of themselves speak louder than the person they are becoming. When your internal dialogue stays anchored in who you used to be, it becomes nearly impossible to step into anything new. But the moment your thoughts shift and begin to align with the future you desire, something inside you unlocks. A new vision forms. A new confidence rises. A new direction becomes clear. Your breakthrough does not come from ignoring the past. It comes from refusing to let the past dictate your potential. You cannot move into your future while holding mental conversations rooted in old stories. If the voice inside you keeps saying, "This is just how I am, I always mess things up, nothing ever works out for me," then your future will be forced to repeat cycles you were meant to outgrow. The mind will always look for evidence to support the narrative you believe. So if your internal dialogue is shaped by limitations, your decisions will reflect those limitations. But when your internal conversation begins speaking from the standpoint of who you are evolving into, not who you have been, every thought becomes a step toward breakthrough. Aligning your self-talk with your future means allowing your vision to speak louder than your history. It means seeing yourself through the lens of possibility instead of through the lens of past pain. It is acknowledging where you have been while affirming where you are going with clarity and conviction. Your future requires a different voice, one that speaks life, courage, purpose, discipline, and progress. The future version of you thinks differently. They make decisions from a place of strength, not fear. They believe in their potential instead of shrinking because of past mistakes. When you start to think like that version of yourself, your present begins to shift. Your actions rise to meet your thoughts. Breakthrough happens internally before it ever manifests externally. Long before people see your improvement, your mind begins to believe something new. Long before opportunities appear, your thoughts make room for them. Long before you change your environment, you change your mentality. The internal alignment is what gives you the strength to break patterns, break fears, break habits, and break limitation. Your past does not disappear, but it no longer has the power to speak for you. You stop interpreting your life through the lens of who you used to be and begin interpreting it through the lens of who you are becoming. The shift requires intentionality. The past has a strong pull because it is familiar. It is easy for your internal conversation to default to the old narrative. But every time you catch yourself thinking in a way that limits your future, you have the opportunity to redirect your thoughts. You can choose to speak from a place of vision instead of memory. You can choose to say, I am changing, I am growing, I am capable, I am stepping into something greater. Over time, those repeated declarations reshape your identity and adjust your mental compass toward the direction you want to go. Aligning your inner conversation with your future also means releasing the labels that past experiences tried to attach to you. Maybe you were once insecure, but that doesn't mean you have to carry insecurity into your future. Maybe you made poor decisions, but that doesn't mean wisdom cannot become your new identity. Maybe you felt broken at one point, but that doesn't mean healing cannot redefine you. Your past self is a chapter, not the whole story. The moment you stop letting your old identity speak for you, you create space for your future identity to rise. Breakthrough begins with permission. The permission you give yourself to evolve. When your inner dialogue says, I am capable of more, something in your spirit rises. When it says, my future deserves my focus, your energy changes. When it says, I can build, grow, heal, and rise, your behavior begins to align with those truths. You stop sabotaging your progress because the person you are becoming is louder than the person you used to be. You stop reliving the past because the future becomes more compelling. You stop shrinking because you finally see yourself as someone worthy of expansion. The moment your internal conversation aligns with your future, not your past, the mental chains break. The old stories lose their grip and you step into the first stage of real breakthrough.